The Woman Without a Face. Sounds kind of like the title of a mystery novel, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But this isn't fiction. This is a pay. We're doing a deep dive today into a true story, a case that baffled investigators across Europe for over 15 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah. We're going to try and unravel the mystery of this phantom criminal who left DNA at over 40 crime scenes.
40?
Yeah. Everything from petty theft to murder. And we'll be using excerpts from a true crime podcast episode as our guide today. So buckle up. This story takes some unexpected turns, and it might just make you question everything you think you know about forensic science.
I'm intrigued already. What I find so fascinating about this case is how it really highlights the power, but also the potential pitfalls of DNA evidence. It became a real double-edged sword for the investigators.
Okay, so let's set the stage. It's 1993, Germany. Lieselotte Schlanginger, a retired church warden, is found murdered in her home. She was strangled, and a metal wire was actually embedded in her throat.
Oh my gosh.
Brutal crime. Naturally, the police suspect a man.
Right.
But the DNA evidence tells a different story.
So what did it say?
Well, the DNA profile suggests the perpetrator was a woman, and that really threw the investigators off right from the start.
Yeah, I can imagine. At the time, it was statistically less common
Yeah.
for women to be involved in such violent crimes. I mean, it still is, but this was really their first clue that something wasn't quite adding up. But I don't think they fully grasped the implications yet.
Right. And so the crimes continue. 8 years later, another murder occurs. Yusuf Fenbach, a man this time, is found strangled with garden wire. And robbery seems to be the motive. But guess what?
What?
The same DNA profile appears.
No way.
The Phantom, this woman without a face, as she becomes known, strikes again.
It's like something out of a movie. It really is. And then the crimes escalate, right?
They do.
They become more frequent,
Yeah.
and they start spreading geographically across borders.
Yeah. We see break-ins, this bizarre incident involving a syringe left on a pathway where a young boy was playing.
Oh, gosh.
It seems almost random, but that DNA signature ties everything together.
So they knew it was the same person.
This Phantom was operating in France, Austria, always on the move.
It's like she was taunting the authorities,
It really
leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, but never enough to reveal her true identity.
You're right. It was like she was a ghost, just slipping in and out of these crime scenes, leaving no trace, except that DNA. But then, the case takes a dramatic turn with the murder of Michelle Kieswetter.
This is where things get really intense.
Yes.
The murder of Michelle Kieswetter, a German police officer, really changes everything. She was shot, execution style, in her patrol car. Her partner was critically injured, and their service weapons stolen.
Wow.
There was no apparent motive, and this time the Phantom was given a more menacing name. The Phantom of Hybrun.
The case explodes in the media, and fear grips the public. Everyone is terrified of this mysterious woman, and the police are under immense pressure to solve the case. They're chasing shadows, desperately trying to connect the dots, but nothing seems to make sense.
And this is where we see the danger of assumptions, right? The investigators had kind of built a profile in their minds based on the DNA, and they were trying to force the evidence to fit. Reports at the time reveal theories ranging from drug use and psychiatric treatment to a transient lifestyle, and even potential connections to Romani communities. Some even speculated that she might be disguising herself as a man.
They were grasping at straws, weren't they?
It seems that way.
Interviewing male accomplices, caught for other crimes, hoping one would reveal the woman without a face. And the fact that no one ever gave her up just added to the mystery.
Right, it created this illusion that she had some kind of hypnotic power over people, which, looking back, makes the truth even more astonishing.
I know. The discovery of a burnt male corpse in France, and the details about an asylum seeker application, those were the pieces. That finally made the puzzle click into place. And the truth was more shocking than anyone could have imagined. This Phantom, this criminal mastermind, this most wanted woman in Germany, was actually an elderly factory worker who had unknowingly contaminated the cotton swabs used to collect DNA at all those crime scenes.
It's a twist worthy of a Hollywood thriller, and it exposed a major flaw in the investigation, a systemic failure that had far-reaching consequences.
I can only imagine the embarrassment for the investigators must have been immense. Millions of euros spent, years wasted, countless lives disrupted, all because of contaminated cotton swabs. It really makes you think about the fragility of forensic evidence and the importance
of
rigorous protocol.
Absolutely. The Phantom of Heilbronn case became a stark lesson in the need for continuous improvement and standardization in forensic science. It led to the introduction of international standards
Yeah.
like ISO 18385, which outlines procedures for the manufacture and use of forensic consumables to minimize the risk of contamination.
It's incredible how one phantom, one figment of a flawed investigation, could have such a profound impact on forensic science. But while the world was captivated by the mystery of the woman without a face, a much more sinister and very real threat was emerging in the shadows, a threat that would ultimately prove to be far more deadly and far more devastating.
This is where the story takes a really dark turn.
It does.
It's almost unfathomable, isn't it? While this phantom was dominating the headlines and capturing the public's imagination, a much darker and more disturbing reality was unfolding right under everyone's noses.
And you're talking about the National Socialist Underground,
Yeah.
or NSU,
Yeah.
a neo-Nazi terrorist group,
Yeah.
responsible for a series of racially motivated murders and bombings across Germany. It's a chilling example of how extremism can fester and grow undetected, often fueled by hatred and a twisted ideology.
For those unfamiliar with the term,
Yeah.
neo-Nazi refers to groups that perpetuate the ideology of Nazi Germany,
Yeah.
characterized by white supremacy, anti-Semitism, and extreme nationalism.
Right.
The NSU's origins can be traced back to the early 1990s, and their crimes escalated over time, from petty acts of violence and intimidation to horrific acts of terrorism.
And they operated in the shadows for years.
They did.
Like ghosts themselves.
Yeah.
But these weren't the ghosts of a laboratory era. These were ghosts born of hate. Uwe Bunhardt, Uwe Munlos, and Beats of Shape. These are the names behind the NSU's reign of terror. And for far too long, their crimes were misattributed, their true nature hidden from view.
One of the most tragic aspects of this case is the role that bias and assumptions played in the investigation. For years, authorities were convinced that the NSU's murders were part of some internal conflict within Turkish communities, despite evidence suggesting otherwise.
Right.
This tunnel vision, this clinging to a preconceived narrative, had devastating consequences.
It's infuriating to think that these innocent Turkish immigrants were targeted simply for their ethnicity, their lives stolen, their families left to grieve, while the real perpetrators were allowed to continue their campaign of terror. And all the while, the police were chasing a phantom, a figment of their own flawed investigation.
The NSU was methodical and deliberate in their actions. They even went so far as to send a DVD to the media, using the cartoon character Pink Panther as a twisted mascot, juxtaposed with real footage of their crimes. It was a chilling display of audacity, a way of mocking the authorities and claiming credit for their reign of terror.
The Pink Panther DVD was their undoing, though, wasn't it?
It was.
It finally exposed their existence to the world, put a name to the horror that had been unfolding for over a decade. But it came at a terrible cost. So many lives lost before the NSU was finally stopped.
The downfall of the NSU was a result of a botched bank robbery, which led to the suicides of Bernhardt and Munlos and the subsequent arrest of Beat Shape. Shape was tried and convicted for her role in the NSU's crimes, but even after their downfall, even after the trial, there were still so many unanswered questions.
And some of those questions lingered around the murder of Michelle Kieswetter. Her case always felt different, didn't it?
It did.
It wasn't just a random act of violence or robbery gone wrong. There was something more targeted, more personal about it.
There were theories that Kieswetter might have been targeted because of her family's connections to the far-right scene. Her cousin testified about links to a neo-Nazi group called Blood and Honor, and there were even allegations of police officers with ties to white supremacist groups. It's all very murky, very unsettling.
It makes you wonder what might have been if the investigators hadn't been so fixated on the phantom. What if they had recognized the real threat sooner, the threat posed by groups like the NSU? Could Michelle Kieswetter's life have been saved?
It's a haunting question, and one that speaks to the broader issue of institutional blindness. The Phantom of Heilbronn case is a cautionary tale, not just about the importance of rigorous forensic science, but also about the dangers of prejudice and the need to constantly challenge our assumptions. We can't afford to be blinded by our biases, especially when lives are at stake.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? The very systems designed to protect us can sometimes fail in the most dramatic ways. And when those failures are compounded by prejudice and bias, the consequences can be devastating.
Absolutely. The NSU case serves as a stark reminder that the fight against extremism and intolerance is an ongoing battle. It requires a commitment to truth, a willingness to challenge our own preconceptions, and a collective effort to build a society where such horrors can't take root.
The trial of Shop and her accomplices did bring the NSU's crimes into the spotlight, but it also revealed a chilling truth about the pervasiveness of far-right ideology in Germany and beyond.
What's particularly disturbing is that the NSU was not an isolated phenomenon. Their crimes forced Germany and Europe as a whole to confront the uncomfortable reality that far-right extremism is not a relic of the past, it's a persistent threat that continues to evolve and adapt.
And amidst all of this, it's crucial to remember the victims, the Turkish immigrants whose lives were tragically cut short, their families left with the unimaginable pain of loss. Their stories deserve to be heard, their memories honored.
It's through remembering and understanding their experiences that we can truly grasp the human cost of hatred and intolerance. And it's by working to combat those forces that we can prevent such tragedies from happening again.
The Phantom of Heilbronn case began as a mystery, a ghost story that captivated the world. But it ultimately unveiled something far more sinister, far more real. It exposed the fallibility of our systems, the dangers of our biases, and the enduring threat of extremism.
And while the Phantom herself turned out to be a figment of a contaminated investigation, her legacy is very real. The case led to significant changes in forensic science, with the introduction of international standards like ISO 1385 to prevent future contamination. It prompted a reassessment of cold cases, raising questions about potential miscarriages of justice, and it heightened awareness of the far-right threat, forcing law enforcement and intelligence agencies to reevaluate their strategies.
It's ironic, isn't it? This phantom, this non-existent criminal, ended up having a profound and lasting impact on the world.
It's a reminder that even in the pursuit of justice, we must remain vigilant, constantly questioning our assumptions, and striving for greater accuracy and fairness.
And the case of Peggy Knobloch, the young girl whose remains were found years later, with a false DNA match to Ube on Hart, serves as a chilling reminder that even with improved standards, mistakes can still happen.
Which brings us back to the question we posed at the beginning. How do you think the Phantom of Heilbronn case changed forensic science and investigations? What lessons can we, as individuals and as a society, learn from this incredible story?
It's a question worth pondering, because the fight against extremism, against ignorance, against the very forces that allowed a group like the NSU to thrive, that fight is far from over. It requires awareness, vigilance, and a commitment to challenging our own biases.
We can't afford to chase phantoms, while the real threats remain hidden in plain sight.
Well said. That's a wrap on our deep dive into The Woman Without a Face. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged.